everyone. I'm James Milan, and welcome to this conversation as part of our series, Your Arlington Dollar. Those of you who have seen previous segments in the series will know that we follow our dollar from where they come from and where they go within our town. In previous investigations, we've discovered that one of the big parts of the budget being submitted to town meeting is the creation of a new director position in town, that of Director of Facilities Maintenance. In order to get a better idea of why we need such a position and what it is going to look like and how this officer's position will operate, as well as the department that may be created, we have in our studio Andrew Flanagan, who is our Deputy Town Manager, and Barbara Thornton, who has been a longtime member of the Capital Planning Committee and a former town meeting and now, again, current town meeting member. So thank you both for coming in to talk with us today about this. Barbara, I wanted to start by asking you just to give us some sense, walk us through the background to the creation of this position. How long have we known that such a thing was necessary, and why?
Okay, I'm going to give kind of a 40,000-foot view of this, going way back in time. I've sat on the Capital Planning Committee for 25 years, and regularly the Capital Planning Committee gets requests from departments saying, we need a new building, and another department will submit a request saying, we need to paint our existing building. One of those, legally and formally, is categorized as capital, and the other is categorized as maintenance. So we always say no to maintenance because it's not within our job description. It's not legally appropriate for us to approve maintenance issues. But not having any other source of money, we are seeing the degradation of some of our buildings that we've invested in. I want to take a little bit of a divergence and explain, because I know your listeners are interested in where the money comes from. The maintenance, the money for the capital planning process for the big expenditures comes mostly from bonding. And Arlington is very fortunate that we have, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we have a AAA bond rating, which means right now we can go to the capital markets and we can borrow money at something like 2 to 3%, which is terrific. If those of you who are trying to buy a new house and get a mortgage will appreciate what a great deal it is for Arlington to be so well managed, to have a AAA rating, and be able to get that. So we get the money, and we start the construction of the buildings. And we've built schools. We're building a new fire station now. We're rebuilding the police department building. But all of those, the length of life of those buildings assume like a 20-year or a 40-year life. And if we don't maintain those buildings, because the assumption of that lifetime assumes the maintenance, then we're going to have to replace them sooner. So the argument for maintenance is not to spend more money. It is to keep us from having to buy a new building by 5, 10, 15 years.
Right, so there's a clear connection between maintenance and capital spending in that the better you do on the maintenance side, the more you can count on not having to expend on the capital side.
Yeah, and for like 20 years, or particularly the last 10 years of watching the capital planning say, no, we cannot honor this request from this department because it's a maintenance request. I turned into the official nag for the capital planning department, saying we've really got to do something about maintenance. Charlie Foskett said, okay, see what you can do. We took a proposal to the Board of Selectmen, and in the fall of 2012, they approved the maintenance, the idea of doing a maintenance department, still very general, and asked us to set up a committee. And in 2013, we set up a committee to do that. And I want Andrew to talk about that, but I want to say a little bit something, because I have this feeling if you're sitting out there listening to this and you're thinking about money and maintenance and infrastructure, you may get bored, and I don't want that to happen. So if you all go to your search engine and Google John Oliver on maintenance, there is a absolutely terrific video of just how important maintenance is to us. Deferred maintenance is something like a $3 trillion national problem for us. Bridges are falling down. Buildings, gas leaks are blowing up buildings. I mean, we have got to invest in new infrastructure, and we've got to maintain the infrastructure that we've got. So I'm going to
Thank you.
stop there.
And Andrew, before we dig down into exactly how this is going to operate and be structured and be implemented, et cetera, assuming, of course, that town meeting approves of this expenditure. I wanted to ask, what's the time frame for all of this happening in a general sense, and if you can walk us through that.
Sure. As I walk you through as we envision this unfolding over the next several months, I think it'd be helpful to backstep a little bit and talk about how we've arrived where we are today. First, a big thanks to Barbara Thornton. She has really provided a great deal of leadership on this issue for several years. It's been many years in the making, and something that our entire organization, our management team, and all of our staff are very excited that is finally moving forward. So she certainly deserves a big round of applause for that. So as Barbara said, in 2012, the Board of Selectmen created the Building Maintenance Committee and charged them to really look at and explore how the town approaches building and facility maintenance throughout our organization. Just by way of fact, we have about 40 buildings across town that make up just about 1.3 million square feet. So we met as a committee, and we had a lot of great ideas of work order systems and how we deploy our existing resources. But one thing that became apparent very quickly was that we need a centralized, consolidated facilities department. Because
right up till now, that's been decentralized?
It's very decentralized, and I'd refer you to one of the org charts that you're going to see on your screen. One's labeled current organizational chart as it relates to facilities, and the other is proposed. The way it works now is under the town manager, myself and 5 other department heads all have facility responsibilities. And none of those department heads may have any real expertise or experience in facilities management. So as a result, we have custodians that report to different department heads in a lot of our buildings, whether it be community safety building, town hall, the library, our rental facilities across town, buildings that have been decommissioned and now rented out. And then we have our public works director who, in addition to all of his responsibilities as it relates to the public works function, oversees our superintendent of buildings, which is really broken up into 2 divisions, which is custodial services and the maintenance services division. Now, what's interesting is all that's funded by the school department currently. So we have a school department employee who reports to a town-funded employee and the public works director. We manage, when I say we, I mean on the town side, manage the hiring of the staff within that division or those divisions. But at the end of the day, it's very decentralized, partially funded by the schools, partially funded by the town. And the real hierarchical system there is decentralized.
Yes, it certainly sounds like it. What you describe, I think, is a current system in which you have various different departments that are created around different kinds of services provided in the town. And then each of those has custodial and maintenance departments, and as you say, without any particular expertise around that necessarily within those departments. So I can understand that there's a real need for this.
Sure. So getting a little bit into the timeline, what we did is we looked at a lot of other communities and what they were doing in terms of their approach to facilities management. One thing we saw in a lot of our comparable communities was that they did have a consolidated facilities department. So what we did is, like I just provided an overview of, we looked at our current structure, ideally what it would look like, and then just started developing recommendations initially to bring to the town manager for his support. Our recommendations, which I can get into in more depth in a little bit, put them together. The town manager was supportive. We then went forth to the Board of Selectmen. They supported the concept. The town manager included, really the big funding piece in year one is the facilities director position, which will be jointly funded by the school department in town. He included that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you said jointly funded by the school
Right.
department in town? Is that a 50-50 split, or?
50-50 right now for the director's position. He included that position in his annual budget submission to the Board of Selectmen and to the Finance Committee back in January. About a month ago, we appeared before the Finance Committee, laid out our recommendations as it relates to this effort. They offered favorable support, so now we're on to town meeting, providing town meeting support.
And I think we could acknowledge that usually when something has the support of the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, the Finance Committee, I guess we can assume for the purposes of this conversation going forward that we're going to be getting approval from town meeting, and this is going to be a reality soon enough.
I hope so.
Yeah, and history has shown us that to be the case, and we hope it is the case this year. So providing town meeting offers favorable approval, we'll look towards laying out a process for the hiring of a facilities director, and then really begin year one and all the things that we've planned for year one.
And what does that look like, year one?
So year one, what we decided to do, obviously the obvious one is to hire the director, get that person on board, and then begin to consolidate some of the resources on the town side. So begin maybe taking a custodian that reported to a department head, moving them under the facilities department. We also talked about and are looking into start taking out maybe some of the facility costs associated within department budgets, or contained within department budgets, I should say, and start seeing how we'll move them into the facilities budget. You know, it's there will be a bit of a learning curve. It's not every day that the town creates a new department. So in that regard, it's quite exciting. But year one will be a lot of looking at our current resources on the town side and preparing for year two, where we hope to fully merge with the school department.
Okay. And when you mentioned that one of the first steps might be taking custodians who currently are reporting to one of the departments and then moving that person or persons under the new facilities maintenance department, or into the new facilities maintenance department, is that with the goal that eventually all custodial services in town are going to be consolidated in this one department?
Right, and if you look at the org chart of the proposed department, what you'll see is a much more streamlined hierarchy system. So a lot of the police chief, the public works director, myself, the planning director, the recreation director, all of those positions will be outside of the org chart. You'll see reporting directly to the town manager, a director of facilities maintenance, a deputy director, and then two clear divisions. The custodial division, which will include town and school custodians, the majority being in the school department, and then the maintenance division, which consists of our plumbers, our electricians, our carpenters, and construction-related staff.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal is to streamline, have one department, and really over time pull the maintenance and custodial functions away from the departments and place them in the facilities department.
Great. And yeah, Barbara, did you want to say something? I had a question.
I was just going to say there are efficiencies when you do that. There are efficiencies at all kinds of levels, and you can. Andrew may want to say something about the gray building process, but when you have different custodians or different maintenance people working for different departments, you can't necessarily deploy them where they're needed as efficiently. So we can, or the maintenance director will be able to see where the need is and put people out there much more efficiently. Mm-hmm. So I think there's going to be a substantial, we don't know how much, but some efficiencies that we'll see, and both on the maintenance, at the actual care of the buildings, and on the administrative burden that's there now.
Yeah, and as you describe, I mean, you bring up the term efficiency, and that reminds me that I'm sure a pressing question for a lot of our viewers might be, well, how much is this going to cost us, and where is that coming from exactly? So can either one or both of you address those issues?
Sure. The real new cost in FY16, which will begin July 1, is the director's position. That is the net new cost. We hope to pull from some existing resources to establish an administrative function that will help support the director and the deputy director. But with regard to the whole expenditure, the town's total expenditure on facilities, the net new costs relating to this in year 1 will be just about $100,000.
Okay. And then thereafter, as the department is assembled in the way that you are talking about and that we may find more out about in this conversation, there's not anticipated to be additional costs at that point?
One question we've gotten a lot is, what is this going to save us? And
yeah, so maybe we should talk about it from that end.
And in terms of a dollar line item savings, I don't think you'll see a savings, but I think you'll see your dollar going a lot further. So, it's how we deploy our current resources. And when I say resources, I don't only mean staff, but the money we spend on outside contractors for HVAC work, for plumbing work, for painting work, all the private contractors, coordinating them and deploying them in a way that is most efficient, I think will be a benefit. So I don't think we'll be spending less, but we may be doing a lot more within the resources that are provided to us.
Well, that's a great way to explain it, that you may not actually save money, but the money that you're using is going further or providing a greater variety of services.
And it's complicated because we also need to figure out how much, where are we going to put this money that we have? If we have a certain amount of money, where are we going to deploy it? And there are different, when I started looking at the different models, I was really intrigued by the Queensland, Australia model, and they have this very complicated way of assessing where they're going to put their maintenance money in their various different buildings. But what they do is they start out with good baseline data, and then they kind of rate all of the buildings. Like this building is, the Robbins Library is at standard, and the town hall offices are at standard -1, and so that everything gets rated according to how the town views what is a well-maintained building. And then every year that gets reassessed, and the town can decide, are we going to spend all of our money to bring all of the substandard buildings up to standard in 1 year? And that's not going to happen. So it's a much more complicated question. The town has to deliberate every year and get the data that this process will allow us to have, and then make the decision, how much money are we going to allocate this year as a total for the purpose of maintenance, and how much money are we going to spend, how are we going to spread that?
Figure it out, right.
Are we going to do it like peanut butter and just kind of spread it evenly over all of the departments, or are we going to say, no, this department really needs it, or this building really needs it?
And do you foresee that is exactly the kind of thing that we're hiring a director to be able to do, to make those kinds of assessments, or to run a department that,
Among other
which
things.
that is part of the calculus all along?
Right,
Yeah.
and I mean, unfortunately in the current structure, we just don't have the resources internally that do to establish that baseline data. And I think that's going to be a big part of really how we move forward, and that's why we believe that the director's position will be critical, especially in year 1. And it may take more than a year to establish this baseline data, but it's something that we're going to be able to have the bandwidth to do.
It's going to be, it is going to be a 1, 2, or 3 year process, and if it works, and if we are able to show evidence of savings or greater efficiency or buildings lasting longer, if the community views this as a wise thing to do, a wise way of spending the money, or to have this operation in effect, then there are other models that we could move toward to regularize it or make the process more institutional in the town government. But it's going to take 2 or 3 years to get there.
Okay, so just one more question related to the organizational chart, the proposed organizational chart at this point, which we're just wondering, is there any sense that that is likely to change and expand in terms of who's at the top of this department? Not saying that there'll be more than one director, but whether we're going to be needing. Do you foresee that we're going to be needing to, to distribute these responsibilities among more than one person?
So I think they naturally would be distributed in a different way than they may be now, because our division heads, so our supervisor of maintenance and our supervisor of custodians, are doing different things. They're part of the planning rather than just a deployment right now of staff. So if we can take that burden off them and have that assumed by the director and the deputy director, it frees them up to do more work. But over the next years, 3, 4, 5, 6, and as this evolves, I think you'll see other parts of the organizational chart potentially change. If we can do an analysis on a 5-year basis and say we're spending X on HVAC work, we may come to the realization that it's worth our while to invest in a HVAC professional on staff to do that type of work. Right now, we're not doing that type of measurement holistically as an organization. So I think what we present today will look like that probably over the next year or two. But once we're able to evaluate and measure, I think we can start making decisions about how we move the pieces around to do the job better.
Do you anticipate that the kinds of savings that may accrue to the town by creating this position in this department will offset the salary, the expenditure that we're making, or not?
Again, I don't really see the bottom line going down, but rather are stretching those dollars further, and I think that work will be led by the director. So I think one of, as we evaluate the work of the director, once we have he or she on staff, will be, what have we done over the past year in terms of maintenance compared to what we've done in the past several. I think we have a backlog of maintenance, and one thing, and I'm sure Barbara will probably want to expound on this, if you look at 3 levels, short term, emergency response, preventative maintenance, and capital planning, the funding of the big ticket items, we do capital planning as well as anybody. We have a process that's been in place since 1986. Not to get too deep into it, but it's a process where 5% of the town's budget must be dedicated to capital improvement and investment. We do a great job with that. With the staff we have, we respond to the emergency needs of our facilities, which make themselves so apparent after a winter like this. Let me tell you, we do that pretty well. But it's that gap in between the preventative maintenance and taking care of what we have and what we've invested in where there's some room for improvement. And I think that is going to be one of the things the director is going to have to champion in his first several years on the job, his or her first several years.
Absolutely. I think that's that middle piece, again, for the preventative maintenance capital planning committee does pretty well but maybe we wouldn't have to build new buildings or buy new boilers as often if they were maintained, but we can do that. We plan in advance, and the planning process works very well. The emergency stuff we do very well. The piece that's missing is the individual, the requests that are not emergencies. It's the decision of where we're going to spend the money. Are we going to spend it, and what criteria are we going to use to make that decision? So if we have a fixed amount of money, the kind of criteria that gets used or that will get used as this process gets developed is health and safety, expense, amenities. Do we want it to look better? Is it just looking a little downtrodden? So health and safety tends to be the most important. And same kind of criteria that gets used for capital. Any other that you can think of?
No, those are the big ones. And as Barbara said, the amenities, you look at a school building and you've got 20 classrooms, each teacher would probably say theirs is in most need of painting, and it's an annual scramble. Is my class going to get painted, or is this class going to get painted? Our whole goal here is to plan for these things. So, classroom 204 at the Audison is going to be painted in 3 years. There'll be a plan for these type of things, which I think staff on both town and school will appreciate. Knowing that they're in the queue, knowing when their priorities are going to be funded and be completed.
That's absolutely right. If you think about just human nature, it's sort of this, the squeaky wheel gets the money for the classroom,
true.
and it's not going to be the squeaky wheel anymore, and that's going to make everybody but the squeaky wheel feel better.
Right.
They're going to know their number on the list. They're going to know why. It's going to be public information.
Right. And I have to say that I'm sure it will fold into something that we've been hitting on again and again in our conversations in Your Arlington Dollar, which is the transparency that is at the heart of the way the town government functions right now. And so I'm sure this, like everything else, will be available for all interested parties to access whatever the schedule of maintenance is going to be, and everybody will know, as you say, in advance how things are coming up.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, I wish I had the visual, but one of our colleagues, Ruthie, on our facilities management committee, maintenance committee, brought in a stack of work orders, and the stack of work orders was like this, and that was like a month's worth of work orders. So that's all paper. And the other important thing that I think is happening here is that we are moving from paper to software. If we couldn't tell everybody but the squeaky wheel that they were going to be done they were going to be recognized in order if it weren't for the ability to plan in the software, present your information, and then assign the order that things were going to be done, and then have it come up. So every day you develop a plan at the beginning of every quarter, like for January, and then every day that intermediate level, that service request and routine maintenance level of work pops up as a work order for every building. I mean, that's in theory how it will work.
Yeah, we were mentioning before that that this director position is going to be funded equally, more or less, out of the school department and the town. Wondering whether there is a mechanism already in place or envisioned for how it will work, how things will be queued up in the the sequence of projects to be tackled and dealt with, or maintenance to be performed, as between the school and the town.
Sure. So I think this is probably a good point to talk about basically the second phase of implementation. So as we get through next fiscal year, our goal for FY17 is to consolidate budgets, town and school. So with regard to what those budgets look like, our town budget's probably closer to $1 million collectively for all our buildings, while it's probably closer to $5 million on the school side. They have a lot of buildings, and their buildings are big. So I think once it's consolidated into one, it'll be easier for the department to prioritize those things. But I think, just by nature of the needs of the schools and the size of them in terms of the total pie.
Right, if you've got a 5-to-1 ratio that you're starting out with, you can
Right.
assume that things are going to come up in a roughly the same kind of ratio.
Right, right.
That makes sense. One of the things that we've talked about in other conversations as part of this series is the Community Preservation Act and how that is going to be rolled out here in Arlington. We were wondering whether there's going to be any implications for that around funding for building, or is that going to remain a capital budget item alone? Do you have any sense of that?
The Community Preservation Act?
Mm-hmm. Whether CPA funds can be accessed for these
So
kinds of purposes.
it's interesting. The presence of the CPA, obviously, the bylaw hasn't been created and the committee hasn't been created or assembled. But the presence of the CPA alone had its certain impacts to the capital planning process this year. The position the capital planning committee took was that they're going to continue to fund the big building projects. So what we have in queue for next year is a $7.6 million project for the community safety building, which is police headquarters. That would never be considered CPA eligible.
Right.
We have just over $12 million programmed for the renovation of the Stratton School. That would not be CPA eligible. But then we do have much needed improvements to some of the historic buildings that are under the jurisdiction of the town, the Whittemore Robbins House, the Whittemore Robbins Cottage. Those basically got postponed until the CPA is up and running and we can more clearly define the role between the two. I think moving forward, if the CPA does not decide to fund something that may be eligible for capital funds, by no means will the Capital Planning Committee ignore it, but rather may take it up a year later or whatnot. So there's going to have to be some harmony and collaboration between the two committees as they get going over the summer and into the fall. And I'm sure, it'll be interesting to see how that's all worked out.
And there's a very clear focus that was given to us initially when we met with the selectmen in 2012 to narrow our focus as we build this capacity. So maintenance is big, but what we are focusing primarily on are the big assets that are buildings, that are boilers, that are roofs, things like that. So we are focusing less on the parks and open space. That will, as we ramp up over a period of years, that the maintenance of those things will, and the ramping up of the CPA will, I'm sure, intersect in a town dialogue, because this town is great at dialogue. I say that in the best possible way.
Well, speaking of that, I was wondering have you had any pushback about this idea, or any sense in which you are going to need to make certain kinds of arguments or present certain kinds of evidence, either to critics or detractors or to town meeting generally, or has it been smooth sailing so far and you anticipate more of the same?
I don't know, and Barbara, I don't know how you feel, but I wouldn't classify of what we've experienced as pushback, but rather there was a certain burden of proof on us to really show why this is needed and why this will make us a stronger organization. And that bar was set pretty high by the town, beginning with the town manager. He really challenged us to explore models that were going to be a best fit to Arlington and really put us in a position to justify this not only next year, but in 5 and 6 and 7 years, talk about what hopefully will be a great success. So, there was, like I began, in addition to the manager, it was the Board of Selectmen, then the Finance Committee, and I'm sure it's going to be, town meeting will have their questions as well. So
right. So you certainly had to do your homework.
Oh, absolutely.
You really had to make a good argument and have that argument, easily understood.
Right.
We've had some interesting, I would say there's some little issues and there's some big issues. So on the little issue side, and one of the reasons why I mentioned the open space is because there was a question, I'm just thinking of some of the questions that we've been asked. There was a question, does this mean you're going to be responsible, this person's going to be responsible for maintaining all the fields, the athletic fields and the parks and stuff? And not at first. There's also a question of whether the facilities director is going to be the person to call if you want to book the basketball courts, and that's not part of the responsibility. So there's some really good questions about just exactly what this person does, but we're pretty sure that this person is going to have his or her hands full with the relatively narrow scope that we've provided.
Yeah, it sounds like it to me as well, I have to say. You were mentioning earlier, Barbara, that there will be a movement, or has been a movement already, from paper to software. And I'm wondering, is there going to be more, are there going to be more expenditures necessary on software or technology, et cetera, to make this, your vision, come to life?
I believe the schools have already purchased the beginning piece of the software, and I'm sure there will be a little bit more. But the software that we're talking about is not in the scope of things, is not expensive, and this is a big issue for me. I love this issue, just saying. Most cities around the world, and there are 557,000 cities around the world, and most of them use paper process to get things done. And the papers fall away, and they get lost in the file cabinet, and the number one job gets slipped to the back of the pile. So with the software, the level of efficiency is going to be just tremendous. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier about the change in town meeting with the advent of the
Electronic voting.
The electronic voting. So that's just such a minor example. I mean, town meeting has gone from, what did you say it was, eight nights, the first?
I mean, we did 8 nights 3 or 4 years ago, but before that, 12, 14, 16 nights, down to what was under 6 last year. So.
Yeah. So we can see how technology is making a big difference in our lives. Personally, within the town, within citizens within the town, and I think there are going to be a tremendous amount of, there's going to be a lot of information that comes out of this. And as cities in Arlington, you know, Adam is terrific, our town manager. He's a tech age guy, so he understands the significance of the software and the reports that it can yield and the information it can yield. So when people ask us, as they should, when citizens of Arlington say, well, what do we get for our money? What's the return on investment for this expenditure? We will have real data to be able to show them because of the software.
And if I could put the cost in the context a little bit, I mean, I think we were all very surprised at the inexpensiveness of the software. So as Barbara said, the school is rolling this out, and we're soon to be rolling it out on a very, 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 very preliminary level. But once we get up and running, you know, if you know one HVAC service call could cost the department $5,000, one call, and often it's that that HVAC contractor is deployed by a department head again who's not experienced in facilities. If we could avoid that one call, that would just about totally offset the cost of the software. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it like that, I think the benefit is going to be certainly exceed the cost.
I can't wait to get the reports.
Yeah, following up a little bit though on that topic of what difference is there going to be a visible, a palpable difference for Arlington citizens who are paying attention to this kind of thing? You've mentioned the efficiencies and the fact that in general this system will operate more efficiently. Our dollar will go further, as you've mentioned various times, Andrew. But is there any sense in which Arlingtonians can anticipate seeing the visible advantages of this new position and department being created? Or is it more going to be along the lines of, we'll have the data to show you, but not necessarily will you be walking around or driving around or playing in the parks or accessing these facilities and necessarily be able to tell?
Well, I think, like I said, we have 40 buildings in town. Some may visit certain ones more than others. But ultimately, our goal would be is that when you walk into the library, the police station, the rink, any number of the town hall, any number of the facilities, all of which are accessible to the public, that you have a clean facility, you have a well-maintained facility, and you can clearly see that Arlington, as an organization, is on top of maintaining their resources. So I think that's the most visual, aside from the data, that will be one of the visual benefits to residents.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, because one of the things that happens with software and with social media and with the 21st century is there's a level of engagement with citizens and town government that really was never possible before, except for people who were willing to go to town meeting or sit on boards. So now you go into the rink and you're saying, this is looking a little shoddy, and you just shoot off an email. I don't want to poor facilities director, but shoot off an email to the facilities director and say, can you please put this in your plan? And that's not it. Probably it's not going to be emergency, Probably it's not going to be a long-term capital request, but it's going to be called to there will be a process in place where the condition of a building can be called to the attention of the facilities director, and he can put it on his quarterly plan or his annual plan. We've got to get to that. It falls in a lower priority, but we've got to get to it. The caller, the citizen, is right, and that's going to make a difference, I think, for people.
So you anticipate that there will be a mechanism through which that citizen can have, eventually, his or her feedback can actually have a response.
Yeah, those
that they
pieces
can see.
those pieces are in place now in the town, and they're becoming stronger. I don't want to make anybody out there listening think that this is going to happen all of a sudden. This is something that we're talking about over the next decade. And I want to manage expectations. It could happen much faster, and if it's a building, if a difference is made in a building that you care about and you're used to seeing, it's going to feel good. But as Andrew said, there's a lot of buildings out there, and you don't go into all 40 every day, so you may not notice that the other 39 are spick and span in a way they never were.
There are, as I understand it, short, medium, and long-term aspects to this project or this idea. I was wondering if either one of you could maybe walk us through what those are.
Well,
You've covered some of it, for sure.
Yeah, there are two ways of looking at that question. One is the short, medium, and long-term tasks involved in doing maintenance, and that's the preventative maintenance, the managing the service requests or setting up the service requests for routine maintenance, and then handling the emergencies. So that's the short, medium, and long term. We also have the short, medium, and long term of the phasing of the capital, the facilities management process.
And I think that's what I was really asking about. Thanks for clarifying.
The short term, I think Andrew went over the 1 year and maybe can get more into that. That's going to be hiring and whipping that person into line, and that's my perspective. The medium term is to respond next year to the Board of Selectmen, after this has been up and running for a year, to the town manager, to the Board of Selectmen, to the Capital Planning Committee, and say, okay, this is working or this is not working, doing course corrections, filling in the baseline data, that sort of thing. And then the longer term is to say, if this really works, do we want to build this into the way that Arlington prepares its budgets in the same way that the Capital Planning Committee, the capital planning process has a built-in slice of the town's budget? And that's off in the future.
No, I think you laid it out pretty well. We've talked a lot about the short term. It's really a 2-year integration process. Year one, hire the director, begin to get the town's resources consolidated in one place, both financial resources and staff. Phase two, pull over the school resources, and then really get ready to move forward with one facilities department. And then, as Barbara said, begin setting that baseline data and setting really a foundation for us to measure success against. And I think in the long term, like our capital planning process, which is 5%, I think if you looked at we have a FY16 budget will be just about $141 million. So there is a percentage of that we're spending now on facilities in all the different pots that those funds lie. But I think we'll really be able to ask the question, is that the appropriate percentage, or should it be more, or whatnot? But I also think having this department in place is going to have a real long-term impact on even the capital planning process. Mm-hmm. We charge our department heads now with soliciting their own quotes for capital projects. I'm not going to pick on any one of them, but they're very busy in their with their normal responsibilities as they pertain to the operation of their department. So often we struggle on the capital planning committee. Both Barbara and I happen to sit on that, where we have a department head saying, I'm hopeful I can get it done for this price. But when in July we asked them to lay out a 5-year plan, we now have a facilities director who will lay out a 5-year plan for the whole town, which I think will provide a lot of long-term validity to the process.
Yeah.
So I am very curious in some ways, and you may or may not be able to answer this because we may just have to see how it plays out. But looking at year one, and let's assume we've got the facilities director hired, and he or she begins to do the work we're looking for. How much autonomy do you envision that person's going to have over the development of their department? And if that's less than 100% autonomy, who is it that they're going to be working with or conferring with or expected to be part of the decision-making process around the formation of the facilities maintenance department?
So there's a few ways to answer it. I think in year one, well, for starters, they'll have quite a bit of autonomy, as do all of our department heads. We have a management team that we're very proud of. They're an ambitious bunch that have a lot of great ideas on how to improve the organization. So I think the facilities director is not only going to be allowed to, but expected to kind of mold this as he or she sees fit. With regard to the reporting structure, this department will report to the town manager. And I envision that the director will get quite a bit of support from both the manager and myself in year one and into the future. But the other piece, especially in this department's infancy, is going to be working with the department heads who've
exactly, because the very things that this person's going to be in charge of have been under the scope of a number of other people. So will they just be expected to consult as needed? Or I just wondered whether there was anything already envisioned that would be more programmatic than that.
Sure. When we've laid out what we hope the calendar to look like in terms on an annual basis, there'll be a period, and it'll be a period that happens most likely during the summer, or most definitely during the summer, where the facilities director will meet with department heads and go over what their priorities are with regard to the facility they do occupy, because they see things that a facilities director who's not in there every day will see, and work with them at that level to prioritize on a departmental level, and then see how that folds into the town-wide prioritization of capital improvements of facilities and the maintenance needs of the facilities. So I think whoever the first director may be, they're going to have to be very collaborative in working with department heads to really build that relationship, build that trust. I mean, a lot of these department heads have looked over their assets for a long period of time. That's not to say they're not looking forward to the opportunity to have some help with it, but they'll have to be.
Right, they're clearly the experts here.
Right.
I don't think any of them would say that they're experts, but some of them are more expert than others, and some of their facilities are easier from the department head's
Sure.
perspective. Some of the, like it was really kind of a no-brainer for the police chief, Chief Ryan, to say, if I have to put tarps over the computers, something is wrong with the roof. So that's he's got the building, and he can see that there's some real problems. In other problems, like in Health and Human Services, where they have different buildings that have different relationships of ownership and leasing and different standards of operation, it's much more complicated and much more subtle when it's not a big problem. It's just like how much, what are the rules of thumb for repairing stairs, that sort of thing. So all of the department heads, I hope, are going to welcome this role. And I love the gray building. I wish you would describe the gray building.
I'll talk a little bit about the gray building, but before I do, when we when we announced this concept back in December to the department heads, we have a monthly, first Thursday of every month, a department head meeting. There was a lot of excitement in the room. They're really looking forward to this. They're fully on board. And the initial reaction from most is that this has been a long time coming. So I think, as Barbara said, everybody's pretty excited about it at the department head level. So something that is somewhat unique and just a product of the decentralized nature of facilities right now is this process called gray billing. And as I said in the beginning, most of the frontline maintenance staff, not so much custodial staff because they're all within departments, is school department budget. So they could get called over for a full day because a pipe burst in the central school. And then the way it would work right now is that the school department will bill the town for that work. And it's a completely paper process that has to get signed off by the sending department, the receiving department, the comptroller, payroll, and they have to move the charge all around. And it's completely insufficient and it's completely paper. So that's just an example of something that will go away when we have a consolidated department. And,
That alone
that sounds like a tremendous benefit right there.
Oh, yeah. It certainly will.
Or at least a tremendous waste, kind of amount of waste averted there.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're one town, one big pot of money, and we all draw 95% of our budget's drawn from property
owners.
So,
absolutely.
So. Yeah, can I just underline, the reason that I think gray building is so interesting is because it shows when you're a town government and you are subject to the rules of law and the processes of transparency, how complicated it is just to get some money out of this pocket and pay it over here. You really have to do it exactly right. And this town does, and there are a lot of complications, but the town does it so well. I just want to go back to what I said at the beginning. AAA bond rating does not come easily to any town or city, and Arlington has that. And one of the reasons that the bonding agencies like Standard & Poor's and others have given that kind of bond rating to the town is because the town government takes these procedures seriously, they take their accounts seriously, and even though it takes 5 people to move that one day's work at one building into another bookkeeping unit, it's done, and it's
being
done well.
For the right reasons,
and
right,
now
and being done well.
When we can get more efficiencies, the same quality of management exists in the town for managing money, and it will just be able to go further with it.
Well, just to build on that very briefly, I have to say that it has been my own privilege, and speaking from my own perspective, that talking in this series of conversations under your Arlington dollar to a variety of folks who are involved, it has been both illuminating and reassuring to realize that in general our town and our money is in good hands and being spent thoughtfully within a system of clear checks and balances that overall functions very, very much to the benefit of the residents. That's my sense.
You know what? I forgot something. Maybe I didn't make clear. I don't work for the town. I pay taxes to the town. So I just wanted to make clear when I talk about what a great town this is, that I'm not one of the town government, but there are so many opportunities, and I think one of the things that makes the town strong, although I'm not sure that all the town officials would believe this all the time, but is the way that they have folded in people in the community, the Vision 2020, the Finance Committee, Capital Planning Committee, town meeting, there's so many ways that citizens can get involved in this town, learn to understand the complexities of running it, and make real contributions.
Yes, and one of the big messages coming out of our own little series here has been exactly that, and how important it is for people who are involved, that they themselves are involved as citizens within the process, and how important it also is to them to ensure that it is possible and as easy as possible for everybody else to at least be informed and certainly get involved.
And, you know, having had the privilege for the past 3 years to be part of the management team here in Arlington, we take the challenge from our residents and the public very seriously, and we're always looking to see how we can deliver services better, be more innovative, integrate technology to make our work more efficient. And, you know, our residents hold us very accountable, and it's a task that I know everybody lives up to on the town and school side. And I think this whole facilities initiative is a product of that continuous challenge to do things well, do things better, and improve across the board here in Arlington. So,
it feels to me as if this has been a really comprehensive look at the creation or the proposal for a facilities maintenance director, and then what follows from there, which I very much appreciate you both coming in and sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us. I did want to invite you each to, if there is anything that you wanted to add that we haven't covered, or that you wanted to elucidate a little bit more, I wanted to invite you to do so.
I'll go first. No, again, just thank you to ACMi for the whole series, focusing on how we receive our money as a town and how we spend it, how we prioritize certain things. I think it's just this in itself as a series and as an episode or a segment is reflective of what Arlington's all about in terms of providing information to its residents. I look forward to hopefully being able to report back on this at some point in the future and be able to talk about what today is a concept, talk about it as another one of Arlington's successes. So thank you for having me, and again, thanks to Barbara and the entire Facilities Maintenance Committee, who spent a great deal of time over the past several years now in leading up to what we hope town meeting will approve in the coming weeks. So thank you.
That was such a good roundup. I feel like I should let you go last, but I didn't. So now, I just want to say again to the audience, who are citizens like I am, that Arlington has so much opportunities to participate in, and I hope that people watching this will say, what can I sign up for? What can I do? What new process can I fix? But one of the things that you need to understand when you do get involved with the town is that it's not like the town has one checkbook and they just kind of spend money out of the checkbook. It is very complicated, and understanding the complexities of how the town operates, just like the story of the gray building, makes working with the town creatively even more fun from a citizen's perspective.
Well,
and I want to thank you too for allowing us to be here.
Well, on behalf of Your Arlington Dollar and Arlington Public News, I want to thank one more time Barbara Thornton and Andrew Flanagan for joining us today, and thank you for joining us as well. We'll see you next time.